He always looked like he took a 4-way cold tablet and had to run 3 more ways to catch up with it. He was always moving, and he was just brilliant. Brilliant.
Hey fight fans, welcome back to another Top 10 Countdown here on Boxing Legends TV. Today, we'll be counting down the top 10 greatest boxers of the 1990s.
I'm going to keep on going and trying to become the best fighter in the world.
Each fighter will be ranked by how much they achieved strictly in the 10-year period. So for us, we'll be ruling out Mike Tyson and Julio Cesar Chavez as we felt their best work came in the 80s. On the other end of the scale, fighters like Bernard Hopkins, Floyd Mayweather, and Eric Morales were better suited to slot in on a 2000s list.
That ends it all, then I'm gone.
So without any further ado, let's get straight to it. Coming in at number 10, we have by far the most dominant featherweight in the 90s, the man that made boxing look so easy and fun to do, Prince Naseem Hamed.
To say he's right in front of me and I can honestly tell him that I'm going to knock him spark out.
Turning professional back in 1992, Hamed would remain unbeaten for the rest of the decade, fighting 33 times and scoring an impressive 30 knockouts along the way. After his first 10 fights, it was clear he was far beyond his domestic rival, and quickly became the champion of Europe in 1994, and then world champ in 1995, defeating the tough Steve Robinson, who was certainly no slouch. Hamed then proceeded to make 15 consecutive title defenses, unifying titles and beating the who's who of everybody in his weight division.
When I say I'm supreme, people just laugh. Now what are they going to say when I become world champion? That was a beautiful workout. Oh baby, I'm feeling so good.
At number 9, we have the former undisputed 2-time heavyweight champion of the world, Riddick Big Daddy Bowe.
His heart had always been questioned, and I felt like, God damn it, question this. Look at this man, look at this athlete, look at this competitor.
Although he doesn't quite have a resume to match up with the fighters ranked below him, or in our honorable mentions category, becoming a unified heavyweight champion in an extremely talented era for heavyweights certainly gives you a few extra points when being ranked on these lists. His legendary trilogy with Evander Holyfield is the standout point from his career, winning 2 of the 3 fights and suffering his only defeat in his 45-fight career. In 1995, Bowe defeated Herbie Hyde for the then fledgling WBO title. In doing so, Bowe became the first boxer in history to have won the titles of all 4 major sanctioning bodies, the WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO, and remains the only heavyweight to do so. In a 2010 article by Boxing Scene, Bowe was ranked the 21st greatest heavyweight of all time, and in 2015 he was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
Also,
Do you like Riddick Bowe?
I love Riddick Bowe.
You're friends?
Yeah.
Did you grow up together?
We went to school together.
Taking the number 8 slot, we have the former 3-weight world champion and defensive wizard in his prime, James Lights Out Toney.
Fight Roy Jones. That's definitely, I want to fight him, because he ain't nothing but a bunch of hype. If somebody out there said he's the best fighter out there, pound for pound, let me fight him. Let's see.
Toney quickly announced himself on the boxing scene when he was fighting as an amateur from the age of 13. He had 35 fights, won 33, and incredibly knocked out 32 of his opponents, which is just outrageously high as an amateur. He turned professional in the middleweight division in 1988 and went undefeated in his first 34 bouts, beating the battle-hardened Michael Nunn, who was also undefeated for his first title in 1991. For the next 3 or so years, Toney was clearly at his best, showing off his elite defensive counterpunching ability, defending and winning titles over some great opponents like Iran Barkley and Mike McCallum. Toney would remain unbeaten until his 46th fight, when he met the rising star Roy Jones Jr., who appeared quite simply too talented for Toney to handle. Toney later made his way up to the cruiser and heavyweight divisions, where he engaged in some legendary contests against Vasily Yurov and Evander Holyfield, winning both bouts in the same year, which earned him the honor of the Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year for 2003.
Lights out!
Lights out!
Lights out!
Lights out!
Put your foot, lights out!
Hell yeah, shit!
Lights out!
Lights out!
Lights out!
Lights out!
Put your foot, lights out!
Hell yeah, shit!
Coming in at number 7, we have in our opinion the greatest minimum weight fighter of all time, Ricardo Finito Lopez. The only fighter in history to retire undefeated as an amateur and pro, Ricardo Lopez beat every man that entered the ring against him. He made a record-breaking 21 title defenses of his WBC minimum weight title from 1990 to 1997 and scored some impressive victories over the best competition available to him. His boxing style was also a thing of beauty, great punch selection, movement, and could KO anybody at any time with his devastating left hand.
That's the turn. As it looks the time has come here. What a great uppercut. Now he can't get up, he doesn't want it now.
He retired in 2001 with a record 51 wins, no losses, and 1 draw, and remains to this day one of the greatest Mexican fighters of all time. At number 6, we have the longest reigning welterweight champion of the world, Felix Tito Trinidad.
In your era, in your day, in your prime, which one of these guys could you beat? Could you beat everybody out there at 147 right now?
Wow, yeah. My boy, Pacquiao, Berto. Póngalo en lista. Póngalo en lista.
Put the list on.
Everybody.
Hector Camacho, Yuri Boy Campos, Pernell Whitaker, Oscar De La Hoya, Roy Jones Jr., and Bernard Hopkins were a few names upon many that the Puerto Rican legend Felix Trinidad took on in just a relatively short career. He consecutively won title fights on the spin for 8 years in a row whilst moving through 3 weight divisions. Tito, like the Puerto Rican great before him, was also renowned for his great punching power and ring IQ, putting 35 out of his 42 opponents to sleep. Taking the number 5 slot, we have the former Olympic and 6-weight world champion as a pro, Golden Boy Oscar De La Hoya. Sometimes it's easy to forget just how good a young, up-and-coming De La Hoya was in the 1990s. Unparalleled hand speed and a combination punching alongside a tough Mexican heart that saw him grit down and put on some spectacular fights for the fans. His most notable victories came over Gennaro Hernandez, Miguel Gonzalez, Pernell Whitaker, Hector Camacho, and a 96-1 Julio Cesar Chavez, who only an elite fighter could come close to beating at that point.
And a surprise to you that you made the great warrior quit on his stool.
Well, hey, a lot of people didn't believe me, and whoever didn't believe me, hey, that's their fault, not mine. I'm gonna keep on going and trying to become the best fighter in the world.
During the 90s, Oscar remained undefeated until his last bout with Felix Trinidad, which left him with a record of 31-1, and he continued to participate in some legendary fights through the 2000s, winning and losing some, but stamping his legacy as a true competitor as he won 6 world titles in 6 different weight divisions. Coming in at number 4, we have simply one of the most talented marvels the boxing world has ever seen, Sweet Pea, Pernell Whitaker.
He always looked like he took a 4-way cold tablet and had to run 3 more ways to catch up with it. He was always moving, and he was just brilliant, brilliant.
Sweet Pea turned pro back in 1984 after winning an Olympic gold medal in the lightweight category. He quickly moved through the ranks, beating Floyd Mayweather Sr. and then earning a title shot after just 15 fights. In what would be one of the biggest robberies I've personally witnessed in a title fight, Whitaker miraculously lost to the experienced Jose Luis Ramirez, who had already fought in over 100 fights as a pro compared to Whitaker's 15. But robberies would be something he would sadly have to endure for much of his career, retiring with 4 losses, many feeling he only ever lost twice.
He was winning championships running through everybody except when he got bad judges' decisions, which happened against Ramirez, which happened against Chavez.
Robberies aside, Whitaker still beat an array of great champions during his time of becoming a 4-weight world champion, including victories over Jose Luis Ramirez in their rematch, Azuma Nelson, Buddy McGirt, and being the first man to put a dent to the great Julio Cesar Chavez's resume when he held a record of 87-0. But when you look back and reflect on Whitaker's career, the thing that stands out the most was his God-given talent of defensive mastery. Coming in at number 3, we have the only 4-time heavyweight champion in boxing history, which earned him the nickname, The Real Deal, Evander Holyfield.
Holyfield always talked about how he would box, and then of course he would get hit, and he would start a brawl, and that was his nature.
The former undisputed cruiserweight champion left an outstanding legacy in boxing when he moved up and challenged himself as a heavyweight in an era of murderous punching men that were all hungry to prove themselves as the best.
There's a moment in the Holyfield-Foreman fight.
Another left hook and a right.
When Evander went after George and landed 19 punches in a row, he just wasn't going to take no for an answer.
To Holyfield's credit, he did more than just challenge them. He proved to have no match as he went through great fighter after great fighter, winning his first title from the Mike Tyson conqueror Buster Douglas in 1990. And then he continued to beat great fighters like Larry Holmes, George Foreman, Riddick Bowe, and of course, the 2 demolition jobs over the legend Mike Tyson.
Holyfield continues to make it. A left hook to the head. He's got Tyson in trouble. Tyson's ready to go. A snake right here. The Topper stops the fight. And Holyfield has it. I can't believe what I'm seeing.
Evander's fan-friendly style meant he was never in a boring fight. he battled away against a variety of great opponents, some much bigger than others, and Evander never looked gun-shy, even in the later years. Holyfield was regarded as the greatest heavyweight of the 90s by many, but we would have to disagree, which brings us to number 2.
He doesn't want to take too many of those, though. Oh, and a left hook!
44 fights.
What the?
41 victories. He beat every man that ever stepped in the ring against him. Lennox the Lion Lewis.
You look at the state of his face, there's no way. He's lucky the fight was stopped. I was just getting to him, and he was just deteriorating anyway. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Quite possibly the most underrated fighter of the last 30 years, Lennox couldn't have done anything more to prove himself anything other than an absolute heavyweight legend.
I've been training the other heavyweights that I've had, Michael Moore and Evander Holyfield. I always, let it be known to everyone that my favorite heavyweight in the world was always Lennox Lewis.
Upon winning an Olympic gold medal, he wasted very little time at domestic level when turning pro, which is something that cannot be said for many other British ATGs. Winning his first world title against Tony Tucker in 1993, Lewis would go on to beat a list of names that we feel is the strongest since Muhammad Ali's reign as champ. Ruddock, Bruno, Mercer, Morrison, Tua, Tyson, Holyfield, and even stopping a young, powerful Vitaly Klitschko whilst being age 37, which is just mind-boggling. Lewis's style proved too much for the guys in his era. Some called it boring, but realistically, he was always the ring general in his fights, dictating and more often than not, knocking his opponents into next week. Before we take a look at number 1, here are some honorable mentions. Coming in at number 1, we have the fan favorite here on Boxing Legends TV, the man many say is the best fighter in history in his prime, Roy Jones Jr.
Roy Jones still number 1, ain't gonna be that way, baby. For all these doubters, him and all the rest of them, they think Roy Jones is a fluke, and now they know.
We find it extremely hard leaving Roy Jones off any list on our channel, not because we're fanboys or have any sort of bias toward him, just for the plain fact he could do just about everything better than everyone else.
The referee doesn't know which way to move. Roy's is opening up angles.
The blitzing hand speed and combination punching separated him from all rivals during his prime years from 1989 to 2003. He defeated legends like Hopkins and Tony as a middle and super middleweight, before moving up and destroying Virgil Hill and Mike McCallum at light heavyweight, and then making the leap of faith to heavyweight and defeating John Ruiz for the title, joining an elite small amount of fighters to ever accomplish such a feat. But to put things in perspective, Jones might not have the most elite amount of names on his resume compared to a few fighters on this list below him, but it was just the way he dealt with guys in his prime that really escalates him to the top of the pile.